For this exhibition, the majority of works are related to my interest in theatre and the art of memory, and also architecture. So it's a series of works which uses an invented theatrical stage in which various scenarios play out. Really, each one is a journey in itself of developing its own identity or themes. Working in an Eurasian mode was a way to construct a space which for me was a way to construct a pictorial identity. This is very important to me because I think it's really key to be conscious about the type of space I make as a painter, type of pictorial space. And so I needed to find a space which could contain symbols and images which relate to this idea of Eurasian identity I was constructing. I'm really interested in constructing images from multiple sources, from multiple time zones, multiple cultural zones, and to create something I feel is transcultural, where symbols can be shared, are not necessarily tied to fixed meanings, and whose meanings can change within this new context I'm creating in conjunction with other symbols. So for example, this painting behind me, Scène Dorée, is very much infused with a moment in 1917 when Picasso designed the ballet set for Parade, which was a production by the Ballet Russe, Diaghilev. I've referenced this moment because 1917 is considered the end of the first stage of Cubism, which started around 1907, 1909. So we look at 12 years of Cubism. At the beginning, you have certain objects which appear in the Rose period, like Harlequin and this ladder, and disappear for 12 years, and then they reappear 12 years later in 1917 on the set for Parade. And I use these objects as bookends to this moment of Cubism, because this moment of Cubism is still a mystery to, scholars are still debating what happened. It's still this very enigmatic point in history, and within my work I'm not making a pastiche of Cubism, I'm examining it from the outside, looking in. This reflects an interest in the history of pictorial culture, which extends into the history of perspective. The paintings I've made from the treatise by John Joshua Kirby, which is seen as the perfection of the theory of perspective, which was started by Piero della Francesca in his treatise, which was written, I think, around 1470. I became interested in these engravings which describe one-point perspective in their own right as constructivist models. So I started to make these paintings which improvised with these forms in a very purely geometric way, where shadow is also very geometric. These flat planes of color almost fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. So everything has this flatness, but there's also this depth of field also. I wanted a material which I felt would move at the speed of my needs of developing an image. And I always felt I want to make very layered images, because working in layers is a way to work with time and to bury time in the work. I really think for me it's really important to have a medium which I can use over a protracted period of time. So I had to use this method, which is oil tempera, which allows me to have very thin paint or very thick paint. It's like butter. It's a lovely texture to work with, and also resists being refined. Like, you can't smooth it out, so it can't be slick. And I like this resistance to over-refinement, so there's an openness which remains in the work. You have landscape paintings which meander through mountain vistas, and the eye goes on a visual narrative through mountainous scenery, from pavilions to bridges, through mist, through mountain paths, up steps. The Sung dynasty paintings would talk about making a picture in somewhere for the mind to reside in. That was their definition of a picture. I still think this is very valid, to make a picture for this purpose, for letting your mind reside in a pictorial space to transport the viewer. So it's important to me, I've developed this idea to be not only multifocal but very tiered, so you have many horizon lines, a tiered level of landscapes, and unifying them, and within this you have pavilions and covered walkways, for me reminiscent of the functioning of a gallery, because we're in a covered terrain which we walk through, and where the viewer can walk through and meander, and the murals will change in relation to their movements throughout the space. So to emphasize this aspect of images being part of being alive and not as a static entity only on a wall, or even like a photograph which is a frozen moment in time. I want the whole thing to unfold like an abstract painting with a red pillar and a blue wall with constructivist type painting on it, and for the viewer to establish their own framing of the exhibition as they walk around it. I feel the murals connect everything, binds everything together into a cohesive experience, I hope. I think to really let the images speak, because as the person who makes them, I'm really listening to images all the time and what those images' potential is. Not for necessarily my purposes for some set program, but I think images have a life of their own. Another way I think of painting now is that painting can dream of itself, because it has such a vast, long history that its own memory is such that it starts to invent itself rather than being I think this is the best thing as a painter. You're just listening and not trying to use your will to willfully have a clear message. I'm really trying to just create a space and an openness which I hope people can allow their own minds to reside and have a journey and perhaps build their own conclusions.